I wasn't
I'm
expecting
sorry
her
to
to
hear
remember
that.
my name.
I
That
know
was
how
the
much
first
this
thing.
meant to you.
It was Tuesday,
It's
the kind of
fine.
Tuesday that
It is what
drags
it
like
is.
wet shoes on tile. I'd finished my shift at the bookstore and stopped by the corner cafe before heading home. Same seat, back by the window. Same chipped mug, because I'd asked once if I could keep it in the rack for myself. The barista thought I was joking. She didn't. She being her. Ms. Clark. She wasn't my teacher anymore, not really. High school was 5 years behind me, and whatever she taught us back then, English, mostly, felt like fragments now. But when she walked into the cafe that night, pulling off her scarf like it was the end of some long, private battle, I felt 17 again, the air shifting the way it does before rain. She noticed me before I could pretend not to notice her. "You still take it with cinnamon, right?" she said, glancing at my mug. I laughed too quickly, nodding. "Guess some things don't change." She smiled, small, brief, like she was already somewhere else in her head. Still, it landed, a kind of warmth I'd been missing without realizing it. I don't live a dramatic life. Most days it's the same. Wake, work, dinner alone, scroll my phone like I might accidentally fall into someone else's life. There are texts I type and never send, jokes that don't feel worth bothering anyone with. The silence of my apartment stretches longer than it should. That's probably why her noticing hit harder than it should have. We ended up at the counter together, waiting for our drinks. She ordered tea. Her hands rested lightly on the edge, fingers tapping without rhythm. I watched them a second too long before looking away. "Still writing?" she asked suddenly. I blinked. "Writing. You used to bring in these half-done stories. Dogs with secret lives. Robots falling in love. I always wondered if you kept at it." I shook my head, embarrassed. "Not really. Life got loud." She tilted her head, studying me in that quiet way teachers have, where they don't say what they're thinking. Then she just nodded. The silence after that wasn't uncomfortable, exactly. More like a bridge neither of us had decided to cross. The barista set down our drinks. She thanked him softly, then glanced back at me. "You still sit in the window seat. Every time I've come in, you're here." I chuckled, staring into the steam. Creature of habit. She didn't push. She never did, not even back in class. That restraint of hers, it was louder than any lecture. We parted at the door. She tightened her scarf, smiled once more, and started toward the streetlights. I thought that was it. Another small collision to tuck away and replay when the nights were too still. But then my phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number, but I knew it was her. "One lesson you'll never forget starts tonight. Don't be late." I froze on the sidewalk, thumb hovering above the screen, my reflection caught in the cafe window behind me. My pulse felt like it didn't belong to me. Her silhouette was already fading into the night. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't want to go home. I almost didn't go. The text sat on my screen, glowing too bright for something so simple. It could have been a mistake, a joke, even meant for someone else. But my name was on it, the way she used to write it at the top of papers in neat, slanted letters. She hadn't forgotten me. So I went. Her apartment was only a few blocks from the cafe. I'd passed it a dozen times without knowing. The door was already cracked open when I knocked, and her voice called from inside, steady but distracted. "Come in." It was smaller than I expected. Books stacked along the walls, a half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, 2 mugs already waiting. She moved around the kitchen with quiet certainty, like she had rehearsed the scene. "You came," she said without looking up. "You asked." That made her pause. She turned, eyes narrowing just slightly, as if weighing what to do with my answer. Then she gestured toward the couch. I sat, my hands restless, picking at a loose thread in my jacket. She poured tea, the smell sharp and grounding. When she handed me a mug, her fingers brushed mine, not enough to count as anything, but enough to notice. "You know," she said, settling into the chair opposite. "I used to stay late after class, wondering if anyone really heard me. Teachers talk, students half listen, but sometimes you'd linger. I always remembered that." I smiled, awkward, unsure if it was a compliment or a confession. I didn't have much to go home to back then. Her gaze softened. "Still don't." I hesitated. The silence stretched, filled by the faint tick of a clock. Finally, I admitted, "Not really." Something shifted in the room, quieter, heavier. She wrapped her hands around her mug, staring into it like it held safer answers. "Divorce does that to a house too," she murmured. "Takes the air out. Leaves the rooms echoing." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to close the space between us. Part of me wanted to stand and leave before it grew into something I couldn't undo. She was twice my age. She'd been my teacher. If anyone else saw us like this, she broke the thought by leaning forward, sliding the puzzle box toward me. Help me with this piece. It's been driving me mad all week. I picked up a blue edge, fitting it against another. The moment was simple, almost domestic, but it felt like more than it should. Each time our fingers reached toward the same space, I pulled back too quickly, heat running up my neck. Still impatient, she teased softly. Still impossible, I said before I could stop myself. She laughed, low, unguarded, and for a moment, the years between us vanished. When I finally stood to leave, she touched my sleeve lightly, just enough to hold me a second longer. No words, just that soft pressure, her eyes steady on mine. It should have been nothing. But walking home, I could still feel it burning. The following week, I found myself at her door again. No invitation this time, just a message that said, "Puzzle's still not done." I told myself it was harmless. 2 neighbors. 1,000 scattered cardboard pieces. Nothing more. Except it wasn't. She opened the door with her hair tied back. No scarf, no classroom composure. Just her. "You're early," she said, half smiling. "Couldn't sleep." She nodded like she understood too well. We sat on the floor this time, the puzzle spread between us. I focused on the edges, trying to ignore how close her knee was to mine. Every now and then our hands hovered over the same piece, retreating like magnets flipping to the wrong pole. She filled the silence with little things, memories about books she'd taught, neighbors who never returned borrowed sugar. But then she said, almost casually, "You shouldn't be here so much." The words landed heavier than she meant them. "Because someone might see?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to mine, then back to the puzzle. "Because you might get the wrong idea." I let out a short laugh, though it didn't sound like me. "And what idea would that be?" She didn't answer. She pressed a puzzle piece into place with unnecessary force. The silence after that was sharp. I wanted to tell her I wasn't naive, that I knew exactly what I was doing here. But I also knew how easily words could break something fragile. A knock on the door startled us both. She froze. "Neighbor," she whispered, standing quickly. She opened it just a crack. A man's voice asked about the building repairs. She handled it politely, briefly, then shut the door again, leaning against it with her eyes closed for a second longer than necessary. When she came back, she didn't sit right away. She looked down at me like she was memorizing the distance. "You should go," she said quietly. But I didn't move. Instead, I reached for another piece, holding it out to her. She took it, fingers brushing mine. This time, neither of us pulled away. I swallowed, throat dry. "You don't actually want me to leave." Her hand stilled on the puzzle. For a second, the room felt suspended, like everything outside had stopped breathing. Then she exhaled slowly, shaking her head, a small, almost sad smile tugging at her mouth. "You're too young to know what I want." That should have ended it. It didn't. She shifted closer, close enough that I could see the faint line of tiredness under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hand as she reached for another piece. My chest tightened. For a moment, barely a moment, our faces tilted toward each other, the air humming with what might happen if neither of us stopped it. But she did. She pulled back with a sharp breath, covering it with a cough, and set the piece firmly into the board. "There," she said too brightly. "Finally fits." I sat back, my pulse still racing, knowing she wasn't talking about the puzzle. It happened on a walk. Nothing planned. I'd spotted her outside the cafe one evening, leaning against the brick wall, waiting for her tea. She looked tired, her scarf loose, her shoulders bent in a way I hadn't seen before. "Heading home?" I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "You can walk with me, if you want." We moved in step along the cracked sidewalk. The air smelled faintly of rain, though the sky was holding it back. Our footsteps filled the spaces where conversation didn't. "At the corner," she asked, "you're still not seeing anyone?" It wasn't casual. Her tone betrayed that she cared more than she should. "No," I said. "Not good at it." She gave a small laugh, looking down at the ground. "You're 20. You'll get good at it." The words stung, though she didn't mean them to. Something inside me pushed back, sharper than I'd intended. "And you? Are you good at it now?" Her breath caught. She slowed, then stopped near a bench beneath a dim streetlight. For a moment, she just stood there, gripping the strap of her bag. Then she sat. I sat too, leaving a careful space between us. The bench was cold. She exhaled through her nose. I'm not good at it either. Marriage proved that. The admission hung between us, raw, unpolished. She didn't look at me, eyes fixed instead on the pavement. People think time makes it easier. It doesn't. It just makes you quieter about it. I wanted to reach for her hand, but didn't. Instead, I said softly, "You're not quiet right now." That made her glance at me. Just a flicker, but enough. "You shouldn't look at me like that," she whispered. "Like what?" "Like you're waiting for me to say something I can't take back." Her voice wavered, and for the first time, I saw her not as the teacher who'd always had the answers, but as someone balancing on the same uncertain edge I was. The silence that followed pressed heavy against us. I could hear the faint tick of a nearby crosswalk signal, the shuffle of leaves. I could hear my own heartbeat. "I don't want to lose this," she said finally, so quiet I almost missed it. "Even if it's just puzzles and tea. Even if it's just nothing." "It doesn't feel like nothing," I answered. She shut her eyes briefly, as if bracing against a truth she didn't want to touch. When she opened them, they shone wet in the streetlight, though no tears fell. Her hand shifted on the bench, fingers splayed, close enough that if I leaned even slightly, they would brush mine. The air tightened. One move, and the balance would break. I leaned forward just enough for our shoulders to nearly touch. She inhaled sharply, her lips parting like words might escape, words that would change everything. But then she stood, quick, breaking the spell. "We should go," she said, her voice steadier than her hands. And the night swallowed what almost happened. I didn't see her for a week. At first, I told myself it was chance. Wrong timing at the cafe. Busy evenings. The kind of missed overlaps that happen without meaning. But by the fourth day, the silence began to feel deliberate. I went by her apartment once, stood outside her door with my hand half raised to knock. I could hear faint movement inside. Music, or maybe just the hum of her kettle. But I didn't knock. By the seventh day, I broke my own rule and texted her. "Puzzle's still waiting for me, isn't it?" The message stayed unsent. I saved it in drafts, reading it 3 times before deleting it completely. When I finally saw her again, it wasn't where I expected. She was across the street, standing with a young woman who looked enough like her to be her daughter. They were laughing about something, arms linked. For a moment, she looked lighter than I had ever seen her, untouched by the quiet weight we'd been carrying together. I froze, hidden behind the bus stop pole, watching. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and chose not to. That night, I couldn't stop replaying it. Not just the image of her laughing, but the possibility of what it meant. A daughter, grown. A family that existed, even if fractured. A life she hadn't let me see. When we finally crossed paths again, 2 days later, at the cafe, her smile was smaller, her eyes tired. "You're here," she said, like it was a surprise. "You've been busy," I replied, trying to keep it light. She didn't answer, just stirred her tea. Her hands moved quickly, restless. "Finally," she said, "my daughter came to visit. She doesn't know anyone here, so she stays with me sometimes." The word daughter landed sharp, cutting through everything we hadn't named between us. "That's good," I said carefully. "She wouldn't understand," she added after a pause. "If she saw us, if anyone saw us." She broke off, shaking her head. "This isn't fair to you." I wanted to argue, to say I wasn't scared of being misunderstood. But she wouldn't meet my eyes, and the silence between us swelled, thick and final. I sat there for a long while after she left, tracing the rim of my mug with my finger, the cinnamon dust clinging to my skin. That night, I opened my phone again. This time, I typed, "I don't care who knows. I just want to be where you are." But I never hit send. The cursor blinked on the screen like a heartbeat, waiting. My thumb hovered, then dropped the phone face down on the table. When I passed the cafe the next evening, her seat was empty. So was mine. And the absence, more than her presence, was what I carried home. It was raining the night I went back. Not hard, just a steady drizzle that made the street lamps look blurred around the edges. I hadn't planned on it. I'd walked past her building twice, pretending I was just restless, before I finally gave in and climbed the stairs. Her door was half open again, the same way it had been that first night. I knocked gently, anyway. She appeared in the frame, hair damp, cardigan pulled tight around her. For a long second, she just stared at me. No smile, no invitation. Then she stepped aside. Inside, the place looked smaller than before, as if the silence had shrunk it. The puzzle was still spread across the coffee table, a few more pieces added but not finished. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, not looking at me. "I know." She busied herself with the kettle, her back turned. Steam began to rise. My hands stayed shoved deep in my pockets, grounding myself in the weight of it. "Finally," I said, "I saw you with her. Your daughter." She froze just slightly, then continued pouring water into 2 mugs. "She doesn't know anything. She can't." I didn't say she should. She placed the mugs on the table, her hands trembling just enough for me to notice. "Then why are you here?" The question hung, heavier than the rain outside. I sat down, staring at the half-finished puzzle. "Because it feels worse not being here." That broke something in her. She sank into the chair opposite me, her shoulders collapsing inward. For the first time, she looked her age, not the woman who always knew, not the teacher who had answers, but someone tired of holding everything in. Her voice cracked. "I don't know what I'm doing. You make me feel seen, and then guilty for feeling it. I want to protect you from this, but I also—" She stopped herself, swallowing the words. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "You don't have to finish that sentence. I already know." She laughed once, hollow but real. "You're too young to know." "Maybe, but I know I don't want to stop." We sat in the heavy quiet of it, the rain soft against the glass. Her hand rested on the table, fingers tapping once, twice, before going still. Slowly, hesitant, as if testing fate, I placed mine beside hers. Not touching, just close enough that the warmth reached. She looked at our hands, then at me. Her eyes were wet again, but she didn't look away this time. "This can't be simple," she whispered. "I don't want simple." The clock ticked. Somewhere in the distance, a car splashed through water. She exhaled, long and trembling, then finally slid her hand so it brushed mine. Just barely, but enough. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Okay, that was it. Not a confession, not a promise. Just that word. And for the first time in weeks, it was enough. Time didn't rush after that night. It stretched. It folded. Weeks passed, then months, and nothing exploded. No dramatic confessions, no declarations to the world. Instead, there were small adjustments that became habits. Sometimes she still pulled back, her voice reminding me, "We have to be careful." Other times she would let her guard drop, just slightly, like when she leaned her head against my shoulder at the park bench where we once sat in silence. The same bench where she told me she wasn't good at it, at love, at life in its rawest form. That night, under the dim streetlight, she didn't say anything at all. She just stayed there, and I stayed with her. Our mornings found their rhythm. I still had my black coffee at the cafe, and she still took her tea with honey. Sometimes we'd sit apart, pretending coincidence. Sometimes we'd share the same table, letting the silence speak louder than words. At 8:47 a.m. one morning, I noticed her glancing at her watch, then smiling when I caught her. We didn't need to say why. Her daughter came and went. I never pushed, and she never explained more than she wanted to. I learned that love, if that's what this was, wasn't about pressing for answers. It was about waiting and noticing and leaving space for the other person's quiet. Evenings became gentler. She'd text me, short things, puzzles still mocking me, or kettle on. And I'd come over. Sometimes we didn't even talk. She'd read. I'd write again, small scraps of stories I hadn't touched in years. Every now and then, she'd look up from her book and catch me watching her. She'd arch an eyebrow, amused, and I'd look away too late. There were still moments of doubt. Once, I thought about walking away, just to see if the absence would dull what I felt. But the seat at the cafe stayed empty without her, and the puzzle pieces remained unfinished. Distance didn't make it easier. It only made it quieter. So I stayed. And slowly, the guilt that once sat between us thinned into something else, something like acceptance. She didn't erase her years, and I didn't pretend to fill them. Instead, we learned how to fit into the empty spaces left behind. One night, months after that first message, we were sitting in her kitchen. The rain tapped lightly against the window, the clock ticking steady. She handed me a mug of tea instead of coffee, saying, "Just try it." I did. Too sweet, too soft, but I drank anyway. She smiled at that, a smile that carried every small moment we'd shared, every silence survived. And I thought of the first time she remembered my order, of the first time her hand brushed mine, of the text that changed everything. She looked at me then, quiet, steady, her fingers tapping once against the mug in that way she always did. I tapped back once, a code only we would understand. And it was enough. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?